Every indigenous tribe in the region avoided this lake. The stories were different, but the warning was the same. Something evil lived here, and no local guide would go near it. Then a volcano confirmed every one of those fears. The entire north face collapsed into the water, nearly doubling the lake's surface overnight. Thousands of trees were tossed in like matchsticks, and most of them are still floating today. A drifting log mat the size of a small town, 45 years later. The blast should have killed everything. Instead, it did the opposite. Nutrients flooded the water, and life came back faster than any scientist predicted. Frogs, algae, insects, all thriving on destruction. Further south, a waterfall drops into a pool that has no outlet. The water just sinks straight through porous lava rock and vanishes. Nearby, a bird walks directly into freezing rapids, plants its feet on the riverbed, and hunts underwater. The only songbird in North America that does this. Stay with me, because everything I just said barely scratches the surface of what's hiding in these mountains. There is a volcano in Washington state that once fired a plume of ash, so thick its eruption sent ash circling the entire globe. Mount St. Helens didn't just erupt, it blew its own top clean off, losing over 1,000 feet of summit in a single morning. When it erupted, the blast shot sideways, flattening a forest and collapsing the mountain's north face in under 30 seconds, the largest landslide ever recorded. Today, the pumice plain near the crater still looks freshly blasted. No trees, barely any soil, just grey rock, while just beyond it, a young forest has returned far faster than anyone predicted. Even in this harsh terrain, life found a way. The first plant to return didn't need soil at all. Prairie lupine pulls nitrogen straight from the air, essentially growing on nothing. Meanwhile, after the eruption, a brand new glacier quietly formed inside the crater, making it the youngest glacier on Earth. Even now, the mountain remains active. Seismic activity has stayed elevated in recent years, and this is not a volcano that has finished talking. Thousands of people hike it every year, but it requires a permit, can take up to 12 hours round trip, and crosses boulder fields of razor-sharp lava rock. In winter and spring, avalanches are a real risk, and climbers are expected to know what they're doing on this climb. People train months for. Flowing directly from this desolate volcanic crater is a steep waterfall, carving through the pumice plain, and that is Leavenworth Falls. It is one of the only waterfalls on Earth that pours straight out of an active volcanic crater. The water doesn't come from rain or a river. It seeps from glacial melt and the volcano's own internal heat, so this waterfall is partly powered by the mountain itself. The name Leavenworth comes from the indigenous legend of the Lady of Fire, the same woman the Great Spirit turned into this volcano, now forever pouring herself out through the rock. High above the falls, moving across sheer rock like it's flat pavement, are the mountain goats, animals that looked at this broken volcanic terrain and thought, "This works." Despite their name, they are not actually goats. They are more closely related to antelopes, and the name stuck simply because they look the part. Their hooves have a hard outer edge for gripping rock and a soft inner pad like a suction cup, giving them traction on near vertical surfaces that no rubber sole can match. With this advantage, they eat whatever the ridges offer: grasses, mosses, shrubs, even lichen scraped off bare rock, essentially turning the mountain's sparse regrowth into a meal. Each spring they embark on a quest, not for food, but to seek out mineral licks, pressing their faces against rock and soil for the sodium their plant diet lacks, even risking predators for a taste of salt. The herd is run by the oldest female, not the largest male. Outside of mating season, adult males actually rank below the females, and even the juveniles in the social order. When mating season comes, a male follows a female relentlessly until she accepts him, then leaves her to raise the young alone. As the seasons change, the herd huddles in large groups for winter warmth and safety, then scatters in summer across the ridges in smaller clusters, each tending its own section of the mountain. Just north of the volcano is Spirit Lake, a massive body of water that still carries the scars of the same violent eruption. Long before the blast, every indigenous tribe in the region avoided it. The stories varied, but the warning was consistent. Something evil lived here, and no local guide would approach outsiders. When the eruption struck, it confirmed those fears. The entire north face of the mountain collapsed into the lake, raising the lake bed and nearly doubling its surface overnight. The violent surge tossed thousands of trees into the water, most of which are still drifting today, forming a floating log mat the size of a small town. In an unexpected twist, the eruption also made the lake more productive, flooding the water with nutrients that sent algae, insects and amphibians booming faster than scientists expected. Because the lake has no natural outlet, engineers had to drill a tunnel through solid rock just to drain it, preventing the rising water from bursting downstream in a catastrophic flood. Despite this upheaval, life rebounded quickly. Frogs appeared within years, algae bloomed, and the floating logs became buzzing nurseries for insects, birds, and new plants. Lower down in the recovering valleys, something far larger has returned to graze on the new vegetation spreading across the blast zone: the Roosevelt elk. These giants are the largest elk in North America, with bulls sporting antlers so heavy that most people couldn't lift even one side. They earned their name thanks to Theodore Roosevelt, who helped protect the species just as numbers were collapsing across the Pacific Northwest. Unlike other elk, they don't migrate. Winter snow doesn't drive them off. They simply push through it and remain on the slopes year-round. During mating season, bulls bugle with a sound so loud and strange, it resembles a rusty gate being slammed open rather than a deer. the dominant male gathers a harem, spending weeks barely eating or sleeping while fending off challengers. Some lose so much weight they don't survive the following winter. Even their teeth tell a story. A small pair of upper canines called ivories are vestigial tusks inherited from a prehistoric ancestor, once using them as weapons. They are also strong swimmers, crossing wide rivers without hesitation, especially when predators are nearby. Communication never stops in these herds. Chirps, barks, mews and grunts fill the air, and a calf can pick out its mother's call among hundreds. Sharing these western forests is a smaller deer, the Columbian black-tailed, perfectly adapted to the wet, dense old growth of the mountainside. That broad dark tail is not just a name tag. When danger appears, the deer throws it up like a flag, flashing a silent warning to every deer nearby without making a sound. Their eyes are positioned on the sides of their head, giving them nearly a full circle of vision. They can see almost everything around them without turning their head at all. These deer are picky eaters. Beyond the usual plants, they actively seek out specific fungi, mosses and lichens that most other deer ignore. Behaviour changes with risk. In areas with heavy predator pressure, they switch from daytime grazing to feeding almost exclusively at night, breaking the usual crepuscular pattern. Bucks shed and regrow their antlers every year, and each new set reflects what they ate. A harsh winter produces smaller antlers the following season. Hidden deeper in the mountains, behind miles of trail, lie the rotting bones of a town called Monte Cristo, built on silver and swallowed by floods. Two prospectors struck gold and silver. Investors poured in, and within years a town rose in the remote valley, named after the Count of Monte Cristo, a novel the founders admired. At its peak, this remote mountain pocket held a surge of miners, a working railroad, tramways hauling ore down steep cliffs, and hotels, all carved from dense Cascade forest, with no road connecting it to the outside world. Then the floods hit, washing out the railroad, isolating the town and sparking bankruptcies. Nobody rebuilt it. And that was the end. Hikers camping near the old mine entrances today report hearing voices and clanging equipment echoing from inside the rock, in an area where the only sound should be wind. Further south in Oregon, a completely different kind of wonder is waiting. One of the strangest waterfalls on the continent, Proxy Falls. Here, the entire pool at the bottom drains straight into porous lava rock, as if someone pulled the plug in a giant stone bathtub. On its way down, the waterfall splits into separate curtains, with water peeling off different cracks in the basalt, so it looks like several falls stacked side by side. Reaching it means walking across an old lava field where the ground is frozen in sharp waves and broken ridges. Each year, the flow carves new paths over the rock, so photos from different seasons never quite match. The waterfall is slowly editing its own shape. Heading further north, the lava fields give way to pale stone and jagged peaks, holding snow long into summer, eventually leading to the granite walls of the Stuart Range. Mount Stuart, the centrepiece of the range, is one of the country's largest exposed granite masses. Tucked behind these peaks is the Enchantments, a chain of glacial lakes so clear and cold that the bottom looks close enough to touch even when it isn't. Reaching them from below, the only way up is Arsgaard Pass, a near vertical scramble of loose rock and snow so steep it feels almost impossible. At the bottom of that pass is Kolchak Lake, the entry point into a tight basin of water and granite walls that many hikers call the most spectacular scenery in the entire region. Its surface catches the eye immediately. The water is an electric blue-green that looks digitally enhanced in every photo, but it isn't. The Kolchak Glacier above grinds rock into fine powder that bends light, feeding the lake's cold, brilliant hue while slowly shrinking and reshaping the basin it sustains. Above the far shore, Dragontail Peak rises, one of the most technically demanding walls in the Cascades, drawing climbers nationwide while turning back most. Meanwhile, Kolchak Peak stands beside it, and the ridge between them is so narrow and exposed that climbers say crossing it feels like walking a blade with nothing on either side. Here, life is scarce. The lake has no fish, and its water is so cold, so acidic from glacial runoff, and so icy in winter that even a quick swim becomes a test of endurance. And rangers regularly find illegal campers who hiked in thinking the permit rules didn't apply this far from the road. The fines they carry out are heavier than their backpacks. The granite peaks of the Stuart Range are impressive, but nothing in Washington prepares you for Mount Rainier National Park, where the mountain dominates the state's skyline. Here the park feels like stacked worlds, starting in dark old-growth forest, rising through open meadows, and ending in bare ice and rock high above the tree line. In late summer, those meadows explode with colour, so dense that the ground almost disappears under petals. Down low, the forests hold trees so wide that a whole family holding hands cannot reach around a single trunk. In winter, storms bury buildings so completely that staff have climbed in and out through second-story windows while the first floor stayed under snow. Under all of this, the park shivers with tiny quakes most people never feel. Small shakes that show the ground here is still very much alive. The park's varied elevations host glaciers, scenic waterways, and abundant wildlife, providing year-round habitat for many species. For many indigenous people, this place is not just a park, but a powerful being, with moods and rules, and sudden storms are read as the mountain's way of showing displeasure. For all its beauty, the park is really just the outer ring of something far bigger and far more dangerous. The volcano that built it, Mount Rainier. This peak holds more ice than any other volcano in the country, and in the wrong kind of eruption, that frozen mass can turn into mud flows as thick as wet concrete, racing down its valleys. It has a Laha warning system in the lowlands, with dozens of sirens ready to blare a wailing tone if these flows start moving toward towns. Those historic mud flows reached far into the surrounding plains, and today scientists can point to modern towns, roads and farms that sit atop prehistoric deposits. High on its slopes, climbers pick their way across shifting ice, cut by hidden crevasses so sheer that a single misstep can drop an entire rope team out of sight. Inside, the volcano never fully rests. Instruments record swarms of tiny quakes and slow shifts, like a heavy animal that keeps turning over in its sleep. Long before the name Rainier, many indigenous groups called it Tahoma and spoke of it as a living, powerful being who sent water down its flanks so the people below could survive. That meltwater feeds glacier-borne rivers that can surge from calm to raging with warm rain, washing out bridges and roads overnight, while the summit still appears serene. The ice itself is retreating, pulling back from cliffs and valleys and leaving behind raw rock, loose slopes, and new stream channels that reshape park maps again and again. One of the clearest examples of this change is the Nisqually Glacier, a tongue of ice on the southern flank showing how glaciers carve, crack, and collapse. As it moves, the glacier slowly creeps downhill like a frozen conveyor belt, grinding rock into powder and carrying boulders on its back the way a river carries driftwood. Beneath its seemingly solid surface, vertical, narrow crevasses slice through it so that a person can vanish from sight in a single step and be almost impossible to reach. On warm days, meltwater races through hidden tunnels beneath the ice, bursting out at the snout as a silty river that can overrun banks and erode roads and bridges below. Over time, its front has retreated up the mountain, leaving bare rock and dead ice, a change park scientists track simply by comparing old photos to today. From there, that water plunges into a rocky gorge below, where snow and ice transform from grinding glacier into a clear, fast-moving stream. A short distance downstream, the water gathers again and throws itself over a volcanic rock lip, fanning into braided white ribbons perfectly framed by the peak itself. Myrtle Falls. Over time, the creek has been slowly carving its own channel deeper into the volcanic rock, cutting further each season without any help from glaciers or earthquakes. At the base, mist keeps the walls permanently wet, coating every surface in thick moss that turns the whole canyon into a soft green lining around the falling water. On clear days, the footbridge draws such large crowds that rangers manage foot traffic to keep people from pushing for the same photo. In this same damp, cold terrain, one of the region's rarest animals moves through meadow edges and rocky slopes, the Cascade red fox. This is not the common red fox of North America. but a distinct subspecies shaped by high volcanic peaks, with unique behaviour and adaptations found nowhere else. Its thick rust-coloured coat is extraordinary, built for brutal alpine conditions with fur-covered paws that act like snowshoes, providing grip and warmth on terrain most animals abandon. The entire Cascade subspecies population is so small and isolated that a single disease outbreak or a string of harsh winters could push it to the edge of survival. And the water feeding this fox's hunting grounds rushes downhill through narrow gorges, then crashes through one of the park's most dramatic rock channels, Christine Falls. The falls drop in two tiers, one above the bridge and one directly beneath it, and the two are so close together that photographing both at once is nearly impossible. This spot stands out for its stone arch bridge, above the lower tier, faced with local rubble, and blended so naturally that visitors often assume it's as old as the mountain. That was entirely intentional. Every road, bridge, and structure in this park was designed to look as if it grew from the rock rather than being placed on top of it. In the calmer subalpine valleys below the falls, still waters provide a perfect, mirror-like view of the towering volcano at Reflection Lake. That reflection requires perfect conditions. No wind, no rain, clear skies, so rare that photographers drive hours before dawn to catch it before the surface breaks. The lake sits at an elevation where temperatures drop from warm afternoons to near freezing nights, helping maintain the sharp clarity of the mountain's image. In peak summer, wildflowers blanket the meadows so densely their colours spill into the reflection, framing the mountain in pink and white. Foraging and hunting entirely in darkness, and almost never seen, is a rare and highly adapted alpine predator, the northern spotted owl. Its dark brown and cream feathers, streaked and spotted, render it nearly invisible against tree bark, while soft frayed edges let it glide silently through branches to snatch unsuspecting prey. Typically, it raises just one chick at a time, and both parents focus on that single ball of fluff until it can move between the massive trunks on its own. When the big trees are cut, the owl simply vanishes from that valley, which is why the area was protected, mainly so this bird would not disappear. Sharing these high elevation environments are stout rodents that live among the rocks and emit sharp warning whistles. Hoary marmot's grey and brown fur matches the boulders so closely they can sit completely still and disappear in plain sight. They have special yellowish fur on their backs that reflects sunlight, helping keep them cooler while they feed in open alpine meadows. At the sight of a hawk or coyote, one marmot climbs the highest rock and lets out a sharp whistle, sending all others diving for cover, like a built-in alarm with no off switch. All summer, they eat almost non-stop, building fat reserves, the only survival plan when winter here lasts more than half the year. After the whistles fade among the boulders, another volcanic scene waits to the south, where Crater Lake National Park holds water so blue it looks almost unreal. That colour is not a trick of the light. The water is so pure that sunlight travels far below the surface, before returning as an almost electric blue. The lake sits inside a collapsed caldera, the hollow remains of Mount Mazama, a volcano that erupted so violently it caved in and left a basin that slowly filled with rain and snowmelt. No rivers feed it, no rivers drain it. Every drop falls from the sky, keeping the water extraordinarily clean. Rising from the centre is Wizard Island, a cinder cone formed by smaller eruptions after the collapse, with pine trees and its own small crater, like a volcano inside a volcano. Before geologists arrived, the Klamath people described the lake's formation as a battle between sky and underworld forces and kept it nearly secret as a sacred site too powerful for ordinary eyes. Even in brutal winters, Crater Lake almost never freezes, its sheer volume holding enough heat to resist the cold from above. Yet the caldera rim is fragile in places, and underwater landslide scars show that entire cliffs have collapsed into the lake and could collapse again. Over here, cracking pine cones with near-surgical precision is one of the park's hardest workers, Clark's nutcracker. This bird carries seeds not just in its beak, but in a special pouch under its tongue, allowing it to transport a surprisingly large load in a single trip across the ridges of the park. Each bird hides thousands of seeds across rocky slopes and somehow remembers nearly every spot, even under heavy snow months later. That memory isn't luck. The enlarged spatial recall centre in Clark's nutcracker acts like a built-in GPS, and the seeds it forgets grow into entire forests. It nests in late winter, raising chicks in below freezing temperatures by relying entirely on stored seeds to survive the cold. Without them, the white bark pines that hold these high elevation slopes together would barely spread at all. These same forests hide something just as surprising. A waterfall called Tamalich Falls, pouring into a pool whose colour has been stopping hikers cold for years. The water doesn't come from rain or streams. It bursts from an underground lava tube, crystal clear and ice cold before touching daylight. That underground passage filters the water so completely that the blue pool glows a vivid turquoise. The temperature, however, stays near freezing all year round, no matter how hot the summer gets above the surface. From this glacial pool, the trail turns north into Washington, where an abandoned coal town called Melmont has been slowly disappearing for over a century. Trees rise from living room floors, ferns spill from window frames, and wagon bridges sag over the river, their stone ends sinking as the planks rot away. Beneath the soil, rusted mine tracks and collapsed tunnels still thread the hillside, and locals tell stories of strange, hollow sounds underfoot when you step in just the wrong place. Not far from this silence, Tokti Falls waits with a very different kind of drama. A waterfall so precisely framed by volcanic rock, it looks almost deliberately designed. The gorge walls are columnar basalt, formed as cooling lava split into near-perfect hexagonal columns, stacked like tiles on end, which the river follows as it carves cleanly through the stone. At the bottom, the water plunges into an emerald basin, its green glow born of its clarity and volume, the same optical trick that makes some ocean waters shine. Just downstream, the American Dipper treats the freezing rapids not as an obstacle, but as a dining room. It is the only truly aquatic songbird in North America, a small, round, slate-grey bird that walks directly into fast-moving streams, planting its feet on the riverbed and hunting underwater. They are like finely tuned diving machines, with oil-coated feathers that stay dry, a flap sealing their nostrils, and a built-in lens that sharpens underwater vision. Using these adaptations, it plunges its head into the current, snatching mayfly nymphs, stonefly larvae, small fish, and eggs straight from the rocks, feeding almost entirely from the river. Its song is a surprisingly full, melodic series of whistles and warbles, clear and loud even amid roaring white water, while it bobs rhythmically on rocks. Despite living year-round in near-freezing mountain streams, it never migrates, singing loudly through winter storms on the same stretch of river where it hatched. Predators that hunt by sound have almost no advantage here, as the constant roar of the rapids drowns everything out, giving the Dipper a natural, round-the-clock shield. The rivers of Oregon eventually drain southward, and following them leads to a very different kind of landmark. Mount Shasta, a glacier-capped giant so massive and so alone on the skyline. It rises so steeply that it shapes its own weather, drawing moisture into a lens-shaped cloud that crowns the summit like a permanent hat. That cloud is a warning sign. Winds above the summit can shift fast and without notice, making the upper mountain a serious challenge, even for experienced climbers. On its western flank, Shastina rises straight from the mountain, a massive secondary cone so large that would count as a major volcano anywhere else in the range. Beneath the surface, an extensive network of springs pushes glacial meltwater through the volcanic rock, quietly supplying rivers that entire communities across the region depend on. Those glaciers, though, are shrinking. Researchers have documented significant ice loss in recent decades, trimming the mountain's white cap year by year. That loss matters beyond the scenery, since Shasta sits atop a magma system that erupted just centuries ago and remains one of the most likely volcanoes in the country to erupt again. The Wintu people, who have lived here for generations, regard the mountain as the centre of creation, keeping certain ceremonies and stories about Shasta within the community, away from outside eyes. Meanwhile, Garibaldi Provincial Park carries that same volcanic energy into a world of sprawling ice fields, jagged glaciated peaks, and alpine lakes. It lies at the northern end of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, the same chain of fire that formed Mount Shasta and Mount Rainier, and ultimately gave rise to Mount Garibaldi. This volcano erupted beneath a massive glacier, and the thick ice shaped the cooling lava into steep, unstable walls that geologists still monitor today. For generations, the Squamish and Lilwat peoples have considered these high alpine zones sacred, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds feels especially thin. On calm days, the surrounding peaks reflect sharply in the park's still lakes, blurring the line between water and sky and leaving hikers unsure which way is up. At the centre of all of this is Garibaldi Lake, a massive, pristine glacial reservoir in the entire park. Its bright turquoise colour comes from glacial flour, tiny rock particles ground by glaciers and carried into the water, scattering sunlight and making the lake glow even on grey days. In winter, the surface freezes over completely, creating a serene, glassy expanse that transforms the lake into a silent, icy panorama. The lake feels dangerous, held in place by the barrier, a wall of volcanic debris that geologists say could fail in a strong earthquake, sending the water toward nearby communities. Despite harsh winters and a brief summer, the shoreline bursts to life each year with wildflowers and wildlife, packing a full year of life into a short season. Rising sharply above the water, impossible to ignore and slightly threatening from every angle, is the park's most iconic volcanic peak, Black Tusk Mountain. Named for its jagged black spire, it is the hardened lava core of an old stratovolcano, stripped bare by glaciers until only the toughest rock remained. The result is a pinnacle so sharp and dark, it looks less like a mountain and more like something that punched through the surface from below and refused to go back down. The Squamish people call it the landing place of the Thunderbird, a powerful supernatural being said to have used the peak as a perch. On clear days, the view from the top stretches across the southern coast mountains, with Garibaldi Lake glowing far below. Further along the Cascade Arc, Mount Hood rises as Oregon's highest peak, its heavily glaciated summit anchoring the skyline for an entire region. Though dormant, it sits above an active magma system that erupted a few centuries ago and is one of the most closely monitored and potentially dangerous volcanoes. Its upper slopes hold more glaciers than any other mountain in Oregon, though many are retreating rapidly, with some losing over a third of their volume in recent decades. The glaciers and the mountain's height make the weather unpredictable, as clear skies can turn to total whiteout in under an hour, catching even experienced climbers by surprise. Despite the risks, Hood is a popular glaciated peak, with thousands climbing each season, usually aiming for the summit, before afternoon ice melt makes the slopes unstable. According to a legend, the two nearby peaks once fought over a woman until the Great Spirit destroyed the land bridge connecting them, turning both into volcanoes, a story geologists say matches the landforms. The mountain's extensive network of melting glaciers feeds directly into several surrounding alpine lakes and forested valleys. Trillium Lake is the most famous of them, a clear, still body of water sitting directly south of Mount Hood, inside a dense evergreen forest. On calm mornings, the entire southern face of the volcano reflects off the surface with almost unsettling accuracy, a mirror image so sharp it looks somehow unreal. That reflection appears only under calm, clear conditions, making a perfect shot so rare, photographers drive hours before dawn to catch it. The lake has no visible inlet or outlet, fed entirely by snowmelt seeping through the ground, rising and falling with the seasons in ways that are almost impossible to notice from the shore. In peak summer, the surrounding meadows fill so densely with wildflowers that the colour bleeds into the reflection, framing the mountain's image in pink and white. In winter, the lake freezes solid, and the forest buries under snow so thick the entire area becomes unreachable, sealed off as if it simply stopped existing. When spring returns, the ice pulls back in large floating sheets, and the first animals test the shoreline edges carefully before committing to the new season. Deeper in the forest, further from the trail and further from the crowd, Lost Lake rests in thick, old-growth timber with its own unobstructed view of the volcano. Its name comes from early settlers who struggled to relocate it in a landscape with few landmarks. What's wild is that every autumn, the lake drains almost completely through a natural lava tube, the water slipping underground until snowmelt refills it in spring. This cycle is so consistent that locals watch the shoreline drop each year, though it took researchers much longer to confirm where the water actually goes. On perfectly still mornings, the lake surface turns glassy, and birds landing on the water send ripples travelling cleanly to the opposite shore. The surrounding forest is so undisturbed, it acts as a wildlife corridor, where elk, black bear, and river otters pass through with little sign of human presence. In places, the old-growth trees grow so tall and dense that on overcast days the forest floor stays almost completely dry, even during heavy rain. Just beyond these trees, 3 volcanic peaks rise side by side above glaciers, lava fields, and alpine lakes. Known as the Three Sisters, they are separate stratovolcanoes, each built by different eruption cycles and shaped by the forces behind them. Among them, the South Sister is the youngest and most active, quietly swelling in the early 2000s as shifting magma pushed it back onto monitoring lists before the movement slowed. In contrast, the Middle Sister holds the most glacial ice, its upper slopes feeding meltwater into a network of alpine lakes scattered across the valley floor. Further north, the oldest peak, the North Sister, has eroded into loose, stacked rubble, forcing climbers to test every step. Between these summits, lava fields are so young that almost nothing grows, with raw black rock stretching through meadows and forest like open wounds. Long before modern observation, the Kalapuya tribe saw these peaks as powerful female spirits, their closeness symbolizing balance, protection, and a bond between land and people. Even now, that closeness shapes the weather, as a single storm can hit all three at once with completely different conditions, one in sun, one in cloud, and one buried in snow. The same geological forces that built the Three Sisters also fractured the surrounding land, cracking open older volcanoes and exposing their interiors to the sky. One vivid example is Broken Top, which glaciers have stripped open, revealing its original core for miles around. This has created a jagged, multicoloured wall of rock, banded in bold reds, yellows and blacks, each colour marking a different period of eruption. Glaciers still cling to the upper walls, continuing to widen the opening they have spent thousands of years carving. Loose, fractured rock shifts constantly on Broken Top's upper slopes, making it one of the most geologically restless surfaces in the area, despite being extinct. Resting in this high elevation terrain lies a sprawling alpine lake, surrounded by meadows and completing the volcanic scenery, is Sparks Lake. It spreads across a lava dam basin instead of cutting downward, which makes it shallow for its size, so it warms quickly in summer and freezes early in winter. Beneath the surface, porous volcanic rock drains water slowly, and by late summer the lake shrinks, its shoreline pulling back to expose the lava bed. On calm mornings, the South Sister and Broken Top both reflect perfectly off the water, creating a mirrored scene. Surrounding meadows burst into colour for a few short weeks each summer, among the most productive wildflower zones in the central region, before the high elevation shuts them down. When winter arrives, the lake freezes solid and the meadows vanish under snow, leaving the whole basin sealed off and unreachable for months. Nearby, tucked inside a river canyon, Jawbone Flats lingers where miners once worked, and the forest now creeps in a little further every year. The camp was built for gold and silver mining far into Opal Creek, so remote that even basic machinery was hard to bring in. When mining became too expensive in this isolated place, workers just walked away, leaving the camp behind. Old ore carts, broken engine parts and antique trucks still sit where they were left, slowly covered by moss and roots. Some original buildings stand, a few cabins, a machine shop, a cookhouse and a small schoolhouse, holding firm despite years of rain and snow. Today it functions as an educational retreat where students, researchers and conservation groups study one of the region's most intact old-growth forests. South of here, the geology is anything but subtle. Lassen Volcanic National Park hosts shield volcanoes, cinder cones, stratovolcanoes, and plug domes all in one rare patch of earth, and the ground makes sure you feel it. High above all of this sits Lake Helen, one of the park's highest lakes, holding some of the deepest seasonal snowpack ever recorded in California, and staying frozen well into summer. The water in this lake is extraordinarily clear because the surrounding volcanic rock filters run off naturally, leaving almost no sediment to cloud it. Nearby, the park's hot springs host layers of heat-loving microbes, each thriving in its own temperature range, offering researchers clues about how life might exist on other planets. Dense pine forest grows up to the edge of the hydrothermal zones, with healthy trees just meters from ground that would kill them, a boundary so sharp it looks drawn by hand. Large sections of the surrounding land now show something far more deliberate and far more damaging. Whole hillsides stripped clean by industrial deforestation. Logging operations outside the park's protected boundaries have removed so much tree cover that satellite images show a jarring patchwork of green forest and bare, exposed earth. When trees disappear on this scale, the soil becomes unstable, rain washes it away quickly, and streams that were once clear start carrying heavy sediment. Dead, burned trees left by wildfires, some sparked by the dry conditions that deforestation creates, now cover entire hillsides in ghostly grey rows. Contrasting with the scarred forests are highly active geothermal areas, filled with boiling mud pots and steaming vents at Bumpass Hell. It is the largest hydrothermal area in the park, a sprawling, hissing field where superheated water from underground forces its way to the surface in dozens of places at once. The pools here reach temperatures close to 322 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cook food in seconds and dissolve skin on contact. Sulfuric gases rising from the vents have been slowly eating away at the surrounding rock for centuries, turning solid ground into soft, unstable crust that can collapse without warning. That danger became real when a guide broke through the thin crust and severely burned his leg, an accident that cost him the limb. His misfortune gave this place its name, and the wooden boardwalk built here today exists precisely because the ground cannot be trusted. Strangely, life still finds a way here. Certain heat-loving microorganisms thrive in these boiling pools, and scientists study them to understand how life might survive on other planets. The colours tell the story. Bright yellows come from sulfur deposits, orange and red from iron minerals, and the blue-grey tones from silica water cooling at the edges. All this heat and pressure comes from something much larger directly above, the park's most commanding feature, Lassen Peak. It is one of the largest plug dome volcanoes on Earth and remains active, monitored constantly by scientists tracking tremors, gas emissions, and ground shifts. The eruption also unleashed a massive mud flow that tore down the mountainside, snapping trees like matchsticks and carving scars still visible today. For the Maidu people, who lived here long before park boundaries existed, the peak was home to a great spirit that expressed anger through fire and shaking earth. That belief was not without reason. The ground here has been restless for so long, and geologists confirm the system beneath it is still very much alive. Wind speeds near the summit can exceed hurricane force, and temperatures can swing from mild to dangerously cold within a single afternoon, catching unprepared hikers badly off guard. Snow can fall on Lassen Peak in any month, even July and August, making it one of the most climatically unpredictable summits in the American West. From this peak, the volcanic chain continues northward, and the next stop along that chain is a very different kind of volcano, one that has built its reputation not on destruction, but on snow. Mount Bachelor is a dormant stratovolcano, so symmetrical it looks almost artificial, a near-perfect cone rising sharply above the high desert floor. It doesn't stand alone. The ground around it has been punctured by eruptions from multiple vents and cinder cones, not just the summit. The mountain receives so much snowfall that its ski season regularly stretches into late spring, long after every other resort in the region has packed up and gone home. That snow quietly does something important. It feeds rivers and streams across central Oregon for months, making Bachelor a critical water source for a surprisingly large area. Wind at the summit can be so fierce that exposed skin suffers frostbite within minutes, even on days when the sky below is perfectly clear. On calm days, standing at the top reveals an unobstructed view of nearly a dozen other Cascade volcanoes. Ponderosa pine forests coat the lower slopes so thickly that from the air, the mountain looks like it's rising straight out of solid green. Those forests are under quiet threat from bark beetle outbreaks, made worse by warmer, drier summers that are slowly hollowing out trees across the region. Heading west from here leads to Burney Falls, which drops 129 feet, while water seeps through the basalt cliff in hundreds of tiny streams. This happens because the volcanic basalt is porous, and a huge underground aquifer pushes water through it all year, no matter the season or rainfall. As a result, even during California's most severe droughts, Burney Falls never slows down. It pumps out roughly enough water that could supply a small town for months each day. The water temperature stays near freezing year-round, cold enough that the pool below it produces a near-constant mist that keeps the surrounding forest unusually wet and cool. That unique spectacle drew attention long ago. Theodore Roosevelt visited and reportedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. Thanks to this microclimate, the mist-soaked forest surrounding the pool hosts plant species that simply don't belong in this dry region of California. They survive only because of the falls. Standing at the edge of the pool, the sound is less like a waterfall and more like a sustained low roar that you feel more than hear. Following the chain further north, the next volcano is bigger, colder, and carries a history that the surrounding land has never quite recovered from. Mount Adams is the second highest peak in Washington, yet it remains one of the least visited major volcanoes in the region. Its summit is not a sharp point, but a wide, flat plateau buried in glacial ice, giving it a bulky, almost unfinished look. Beneath its forested lower slopes sit ice caves, hollow tunnels carved by volcanic heat, melting ice from below, cold enough to preserve ice year-round, even as the surface above stays warm. Over time, those caves have begun to disappear, as rising temperatures collapse and seal them off one by one, leaving some that were accessible just decades ago completely gone. The mountain was officially named after President John Adams, but the assignment was entirely accidental. A mapmaker's error caused the name to land on the wrong peak entirely. For the Yakama Nation, however, it has long been known as Pahto, a sacred place with territorial rights to its slopes, formally recognised in a treaty that still holds legal weight. Sulphur deposits near the summit were once mined commercially, making Adams one of the very few active volcanic peaks in the country that humans have physically dug into for profit. From here, the volcanic chain gives way to something shaped by water rather than fire, a canyon so large it splits two states clean apart. The Columbia River Gorge slices directly through the Cascades, stretching for 80 miles between Oregon and Washington, its cliffs rising like walls of carved basalt. In this narrow corridor, you can watch rainforest give way to dry grass and near desert over a single drive. Dozens of waterfalls spill down the gorge walls, from thin streams to cascades powerful enough to shake the trails below. Wind howls through the canyon so fiercely that it has become one of the world's top windsurfing destinations, a natural wind tunnel roaring straight off the Pacific. Two notable bridges span the river here. The Hood River White Salmon Bridge, a vital steel link between the states, and the Bridge of the Gods, named for a legend of a natural stone bridge that once crossed the river. According to the story, the bridge collapsed when feuding gods brought destruction to the land, a legend locals still tie to the volcanic history of the region. Today, the Bridge of the Gods is a metal span connecting two communities along a river carved by ice and flood for ages. Plunging down the sheer basalt cliffs, Multnomah Falls is one of the region's most iconic cascades, a waterfall so tall and graceful it draws visitors from everywhere. The water drops in two main steps, with a historic stone footbridge perched between them, so close to the spray that you can feel the fall's power in your chest. Even in the hottest, driest summers, this falls keeps flowing, fed by underground springs and snowmelt higher in the gorge. That steady flow creates its own cool pocket of rainforest, where ferns, mosses, and moisture-loving plants thrive just a short walk from busy roads and train tracks. Winter sometimes armours the upper tiers in ice, turning moving water into frozen curtains, while liquid still roars behind the glassy surface. Stand on the bridge, and you are wedged between two worlds, the upper plunge thundering above you, and the lower drop, crashing into a swirling pool below. Away from crowded viewpoints and stone bridges lies a tiny former gold town tucked in the Washington Hills, where people never fully left. It looks like a movie set someone forgot to take down, with weathered false front buildings and rusting mining gear scattered among the trees. Gold pulled people into these hills in waves, and the nuggets found here were so unusually rough and jagged that collectors still talk about Liberty Gold as something special. Old mine shafts and tunnels honeycomb the ground around town, and long-time residents warn visitors not to wander too far off the road in case they step onto a rotten, hidden opening. On certain evenings, lights seem to move across the hillsides where no houses stand, which locals like to blame on prospectors who never found enough to leave. Liberty now feels like a pause button pressed on the gold rush, leaving behind only stories, relics, and a handful of long-time residents. This town's quiet streets feel tiny compared to Mount Baker, a much younger, snow-buried giant that still breathes through its crater. It holds more ice and snow than any other Cascade volcano except Rainier, turning its upper slopes into a frozen maze of crevasses and overhanging cornices. Yet beneath all that snow sits Sherman Crater, a jagged pit that often steams even in the middle of winter, sending white plumes into the frigid air. Climbers talk about hearing the mountain before they see it, the soft hiss of vents and the distant crack of shifting ice drifting through the clouds. In the language of local tribes, Baker is sometimes described as a restless relative of nearby peaks, a spirit who prefers to hide in storms rather than show its full face. That hidden personality masks a staggering fact. It has recorded some of the highest single-season snowfall totals on the planet, burying ski lifts and trail markers alike. All that snow feeds thick glaciers that slide slowly down its flanks, carving valleys and pouring meltwater into rivers that help supply farms, towns, and salmon runs far below. Following the cold streams that spill from the glaciers, you soon encounter a delicate waterfall, named for the trailing veil it leaves in the air. Bridal Veil Falls drops an enormous height down clean granite, which makes it one of the taller waterfalls in Washington. Instead of falling as one solid column, the water hits the rock and instantly spreads sideways, turning into a wide, shimmering sheet that clings to the cliff as it falls. The granite here is worn smooth, so there are almost no cracks or ledges to catch the flow, which is why the water skims over the surface, instead of breaking into separate steps. The mist at the base is so heavy that the nearby forest stays soaked, and moss and ferns grow on almost every trunk, rock and fallen log within reach. People treat waterfalls like as places where the world feels thinner and quieter. So they come here to think, breathe, and then move on. The rocks close to the plunge pool stay slick and unstable though, and sudden bursts of snowmelt can turn a calm curtain into a much louder crash in minutes. On still mornings, the drifting spray hangs between the trees so long it looks like the forest itself is slowly turning into cloud. Down from here runs a narrow rail corridor where snow once overpowered even heavy trains in a single night, the Wellington Snowshed. This old Great Northern Railway grade clings to the steep slopes, threading through crumbling concrete tunnels that were built to shield trains from avalanches. Walking it today feels less like a hike and more like moving through a machine's skeleton, with broken snowsheds, blasted rock walls, and rusted hardware still clinging to the cliffs. Beyond the last snowshed wall, the mountains rise into wilder country still, and there, buried in glaciers and clouds, waits Glacier Peak. Unlike the showpiece volcanoes that loom over cities, it hides far from roads, so remote that reaching its lower slopes already feels like a full expedition. It is one of the state's active stratovolcanoes, yet many residents of the state have never seen it in person, and some barely know it exists. The cone is wrapped in a thick armour of glaciers that pour down in every direction, feeding cold rivers that carve steep clefts through the North Cascades. Even in calm weather, the climb is serious. Crevasses, collapsing cornices, and loose volcanic rock all wait for anyone who underestimates how wild this summit really is. All that ice and snow eventually collects in one place, forming a narrow, crystal-clear lake so long and remote that its far end is reached mainly by boat or trail, Lake Chelan. It runs like a flooded canyon for roughly 50 miles, squeezed between steep, forested slopes that drop almost straight into the water. Chelan is often described as the third deepest lake in the country, dropping to nearly 2,000 feet at its bottom. Temperature layers form inside the lake, with icy water lingering at depth, even when the surface feels almost warm, creating a challenging environment for fish and divers. Much of its clarity comes from low nutrient levels, which keep algae growth very limited compared with many other large lakes. Hidden at the far northern tip of this massive lake is a highly secluded village, completely cut off from the rest of the road network and accessible only by boat or plane, Stehekin Village. Step off the dock and it feels less like arriving in a modern town and more like walking into a permanent base camp at the edge of huge roadless country. In winter, storms can shut down flights and delay boats, so residents often joke that you don't run out of things in Stehekin, you simply learn to wait. Many families here have lived in the valley for generations, running bakeries, lodges, and small farms that all depend on the same long, cold lake for every supply and every visitor. Travelling south, the road picks up again and soon delivers you into a mountain town that looks like it was borrowed straight from the Alps, Leavenworth. Every storefront follows a strict Bavarian look, with carved balconies, painted murals, and scripted signs turning the main street into a compact alpine stage. This design is no accident. The town deliberately rebuilt itself around the theme after its old rail and timber economy faded, gambling that Bavaria in the Cascades would keep it alive. The plan works so well that festival days transform the streets into a crush of music, costumes, pretzels, and lights, all framed by real Cascade peaks. Climbers now treat Leavenworth as a base camp, waking up to church bells and accordion music before heading out to some of Washington's steepest granite. The Bavarian Act ends at the edge of town, and from there the mountains take over again, all the way up to Chilliwack Lake Provincial Park. Here, a long glacier-carved lake fills a steep valley, its water so cold and clear it throws the surrounding peaks back at you like a mirror. The shoreline has a wide, natural beach at the south end, built from coarse glacial sediments that storms and outflowing river currents constantly rearrange. Its flow is powerful enough that repeated floods and bank erosion have forced engineers to redraw hazard lines and rebuild defences along nearby communities more than once. An ecological reserve inside the park protects a rare patch of true old-growth temperate rainforest, used as a living laboratory for long-term tree genetics and climate studies. The mood can flip fast. Sudden gusts roll down from the ridges, turning that still surface into short, hard waves that feel far bigger than they look. Standing here at the northern edge of the range, it feels like the perfect spot to take in a final, quiet view of the Cascades, with glaciers, forests, fire, and water all folded together. This is Cascade Range, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Faroe Island, check out this video.